Hello everyone. Tonight we begin a myth that opened a world of mystery and wonder. Achilles was the son of the Greek king Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis. When he was born, Thetis received a prophecy. Her son would die in a terrible battle. Not wanting such misfortune to befall her child, she held him by the heel and dipped his body into the river Styx, the river of eternal invincibility. But unfortunately, Achilles' heels were never dipped into the river. So while the rest of his body became like steel, his heels remained human, soft, untouched, and untrained. So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to see someone from across the world joining us. Dim the lights, turn on a soft fan or some gentle rain sounds. Forget the inbox you haven't replied to and the emptiness that trails behind a day spent being a decent human. Tonight, you are not an adult trying your best. You are someone listening to the story of a warrior who could defeat entire armies, but still couldn't dodge a single small arrow. You don't remember the moment you were born. No one does, except Achilles, who didn't even get to cry his first breath before his mother grabbed him by the heel and dunked him into a river from the other side of the world. Yeah, that's exactly how your life starts. If you're born of a goddess, no warm arms, no soft blankets, just a sudden upside-down dip and a bath that's permanent. Thetis, Achilles' mother, wasn't your average mom. She didn't take newborn photos, didn't show off her baby to the universe. She was a planner, so much so that instead of preparing a crib or pacifiers, she prepared a death river. Its name was Styx, the river that flows around the underworld, where every oath becomes sacred, where if you dip deep enough, you can become untouchable. And she knew her child would never live an ordinary life. The gods had foretold Achilles would become great or die young, which, in Greek mythology, usually go together like bread and flies. So Thetis did what any lifetime warranty-obsessed parent would do. She grabbed his heel and dunked the rest into the sacred water. Only, she forgot the part where her fingers held him. Never touched the river. No manual, no warning labels. No one said, dip the feet first, then the hands, ensure full coverage. And so Achilles became invincible, except for one spot, one soft patch, one heel, damp, but not soaked enough. Can you imagine it? A man who could slice through enemy lines, shatter entire battlefields with one swing of his blade, yet fall to a single anonymous arrow in the right place. That's the Achilles heel, the tiny, damp, soft spot resting quietly in his mother's palm. And then, the place destiny would find him. Some say, why didn't she dip him again? Well, you try it, dunking a crying, wriggling baby, slippery like a river fish, into a stream that can curse your soul for eternity. Not that easy. Or maybe she believed, like all mothers do. That's enough. History, or rather, mythology, is full of technical errors. Icarus flew too high because he didn't check the wax temperature. Pandora opened the box because curiosity had bad timing, and Thetis missed just one finger And so, one heel became history. But maybe it was that small flaw that made Achilles human. Not a god. A man nearly immortal, nearly great, nearly untouched by pain. Nearly. We're the same. You may not have been dipped in the Styx, but you have your own Achilles heel. A soft spot only you know. A memory no one touches. Something hidden beneath thick armor, but still aches when the weather shifts. Maybe it was being left behind. A message never replied to. A small sentence that still echoes in your head. That weakness doesn't make you less. It makes you real. It's where life reaches in, not to destroy, but to remind you that you're still alive. So if you're curled up under a blanket, trying to hide a fear, or a wound not yet spoken, a softness you don't want anyone to see, then you are more like Achilles than you think. A person, no matter how strong, still has a place that needs shelter. And sometimes, that very place is the most beautiful part. Being born of a goddess doesn't mean you're raised like a prince. At least not the kind who lounges in palaces, eating grapes and playing the harp. Achilles was raised to become a machine, but not the kind that cools your house. The kind that slices through armies, endures pain, and is never allowed to say, "I'm tired." Master Chiron, half man, half horse, full pressure. Chiron wasn't the type of mentor who patted you on the back. He didn't wear hoodies, didn't carry clipboards, didn't grade with letters. Instead, he tapped his hoof against the stone, nodded slowly, and gently tossed his student a spear the size of a lamppost. Chiron was a centaur, half man, half horse, top half wisdom, bottom half speed, all of him, the burden of Greek education. He had trained Hercules, Jason, Asclepius, and now Achilles, the boy with an underdipped heel and an unforgiven future. He didn't ask, "Do you like fighting?" He only asked, "Do you prefer fast or precise?" Chiron taught everything. How to hold a shield without losing sight. How to strike without getting blood in your eyes. How to quote philosophy after a slash. And if Achilles got tired, "No can I rest, teacher. Only, if you want to rest, lie down and try dying." Mythology boot camp, a day with no room for the weak. 3:58 AM. Achilles is jolted awake by hooves on stone. The sun is considering rising. What about you? 5:30. Dodge spears and fog drill. No helmet, no insurance, just hope and reflexes. 7. Breakfast, roasted barley and rock salt. Chiron asks philosophy before he finishes chewing. 8:12 Var. Sword training in silence. Every breath is a dodge. Every step a geometry lesson in combat. 2:18 PM. Meditation. But if you hear a tiger, it's too late. 4:06 PM. Sparring with exploding scarecrows. One has bells. One is designed to cause mild psychological trauma. He sleeps not knowing peace. Only the scent of burnt wood and sweat-soaked sheepskin. Eating like a warrior. Chewing philosophy with your food. Breakfast, roasted barley, dry, hard, philosophical. Salt shaved by hand, no spoon, no milk. Survival is the only 5-star review. Lunch, if training went well, figs. If not, dried figs from last week. Bite fast, adaptability. Chew slow, defense, swallow calm, strong inner self. Dinner, often none. If lucky, bitter herbal tea, as bitter as loneliness. Going to bed hungry sharpens the mind. Nothing left to distract you, not even hope. Sleep without permission to dream. No pillow, no net, no lullaby. Only Chiron's footsteps circling, and a shield thrown in the middle of the night. The enemy won't wait for you to wake. Achilles jolts up, eyes wide, hands on weapon. Chiron nods. Good. Instinct still functions. Go back to sleep. That's the warrior's sleep. Short, broken, dreamless, but enough to rise and train again. Achilles wasn't raised to smile, wasn't taught to be innocent. He was prepared to survive, because being a child of a god comes with no health insurance. But you will be taught how not to need it. Moments of humanity amid a syllabus of blood. But among all the clashing steel and rough-edged philosophy, Achilles was still a child. Some days he'd lean over a well, seeing his reflection ripple in the surface. Not a warrior, not a symbol, just a skinny boy, messy-haired, dark-eyed, never sung to sleep, only ordered. Chiron stood beside him, said nothing, just placed a heavy, warm hand on his shoulder. That's the face of someone who survives. Achilles didn't know whether to feel proud or sad, so he kept practicing sword work. It was the only task that didn't require him to choose how he felt. Wisdom, not just muscle, because killing well isn't the same as being great. Chiron didn't just teach slashing, he made Achilles read. Reading, in this case, meant stone carvings or tales passed down by old warriors who'd survived more than one spring. Subjects, where the human body is weakest, battles lost because of overconfidence, and things no one teaches, how to live after you've killed someone innocent. Achilles once asked, "What if I only want to fight to protect?" Chiron didn't answer right away. He waited until Achilles dropped his sword upon seeing a trembling rabbit, then said, "If you still show mercy, you haven't disappeared yet." Unanswered question. Are warriors allowed to be sad? Once, Achilles couldn't sleep. Not from cold, from nightmares. He dreamed of killing people, people who'd never known him, just stood on the wrong side. He asked Chiron, "What if I don't want to kill anymore?" Chiron, after a rare silence, "Then you are no longer a weapon, but you are starting to be human." He didn't fully understand, but from that night on, he kept a squirrel alive from training, hidden in his sleeve. No one knew, until one night, Chiron slipped a few walnuts into his pocket, then turned away as if he'd seen nothing. Among all the lessons, he still remembered the heel. Each night, after training, Achilles would sit by the fading coals. He didn't think of enemies, not of glory. He thought of his heel, the only place his mother had once held tight, the only spot he couldn't control. He'd reach down, check if it was cold, exposed, vulnerable, and each time he tied his leather strap tighter, not out of fear of death, but because it was the most human part left on a boy slowly becoming a symbol. Achilles wasn't taught how to smile, wasn't advised to breathe deeply. He was told, "Be ready for the next strike." But between drills, among calloused joints and sleepless eyes, Chiron still taught one thing without saying it. if you still feel pain, you're still alive. And in that being alive, there's a small part still waiting to be loved, even if it's just a silent nod, or a walnut hidden in your coat pocket in the dead of winter. Every myth begins with something big: an earthquake, a betrayed king, a dragon disturbed from its nap. But the myth of Achilles began with an apple, and 3 goddesses arguing over who was the prettiest. Extended wedding scene, where mythology meets drama showdown. Tense. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a stage powered entirely by divine tension, and 3 goddesses with serious emotional control issues. Here's how it went. On a lovely day, or at least sunny enough for a wedding, a divine marriage took place. Thetis, yes, Achilles' mother, married King Peleus. All the gods were invited, except one, Eris, goddess of discord. Why? Simple. Who invites someone who professionally starts fights to a wedding? But Eris wasn't the type to be excluded quietly. She showed up, said nothing, didn't scream. She just dropped a golden apple on the feast table, engraved with the words, "To the fairest." 1 sentence, 1 apple, and a ticking time bomb for history. 3 goddesses: Hera, Zeus's wife, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and love, all reached for it at the same time. Tense. 3 goddesses, 3 styles of pitching, 1 unwilling judge. Paris, the young prince of Troy, seemed like a side character in this divine drama. But his choice ended up being the equivalent of clicking "agree to terms." Without reading, it sounded simple. Pick the prettiest. But beauty, when mixed with divine ego, jealousy, and immortality, stops being about looks. This wasn't a beauty contest. This was a psychological test on a cosmic scale. Paris's choice didn't just decide who smiled. It decided who would set a city on fire. He had no idea that his nod would trigger a romantic kidnapping, a decade-long war, and countless deaths, including 1 person whose name starts with an A and ends in a deep sigh. Paris was gentle by nature. He liked peace, quiet countryside, and not making people mad. But this time, he had to choose, and he chose love, because let's be honest, between 3 options. 1, be king and have Zeus's wife watching your every move. 2, become a war genius and be forced into daily tactical meetings. 3, get the most beautiful woman on earth, even if her husband might be a problem. Paris picked the 3rd, simple, understandable, and like all simple choices, wildly complicated consequences. Zeus, also wise enough to avoid this emotional minefield, didn't want to touch it, so he outsourced the decision, let a mortal judge, and that's how Paris, a handsome but idle prince of Troy, became an unwilling judge of the gods. He thought he was choosing between 3 flowers. Turns out, each flower carried a natural disaster. Each goddess tried to convince Paris in her own way. Hera promised power. Athena promised victory. Aphrodite promised the most beautiful woman on earth. And so, Paris picked Aphrodite. Simple. Because who doesn't want love and, let's be honest, a little hormone boost? But here's the issue. That woman, Helen, was already married to the king of Sparta. And that beauty contest, which seemed like a small squabble in the goddesses' group chat, became the deeply buried cause of the Trojan War. And Achilles, he didn't yet know he was about to step into a war of legends. All because of an apple that no one could eat. Clue 1. Achilles' state of mind before the summoning. Some mornings you wake up just wanting to sip water, listen to birds, and think about doing nothing at all. Unfortunately, Achilles never had a morning like that. And on a fateful morning, when the Trojan War officially began, Achilles wasn't allowed to choose staying home. He wasn't the warmonger. He didn't light the fuse. He wasn't pulling strings. He wasn't even in the divine beauty contest. But once kings start raising flags, gods start nudging shoulders, and prophets start whispering destiny, then you, with a heel once held tight by your mother, also get dragged into a game far bigger than you imagined. Achilles was in Thea, his homeland. That morning, he woke earlier than usual, not for training, but because he dreamed of sitting in the middle of a battlefield, not fighting, just sitting, and listening to the sound of silence. Patroclus asked, "You okay?" Achilles just shook his head, then went back to slicing practice dummies as usual. After all, dummies don't groan, and the soil of Phthia doesn't deliver summons. Clue 2. Invisible pressure from society and fate. When the messengers left Phthia, the air in the village changed. No one said anything directly, but everyone looked at Achilles like he had already nodded. Children ran past his house whispering, "Is he going?" The grown-ups smiled at him with tilted heads, like we're proud, though we haven't said it yet. And worst of all, Patroclus said nothing. He just brewed tea, poured it, and gently placed his hand on Achilles' shoulder. He knew, when you're the best, you're not allowed to stand still for too long. The prophecy said, if Achilles doesn't go, Troy won't fall. Sounds simple, but in a society where glory is a religion, not going to war is close to mythological level treason. Achilles understood. He wasn't asked, "Do you want to?" He was only asked, "When are you leaving?" They didn't bring gifts. They brought a summons from King Agamemnon, who was gathering the largest Greek army in history to bring Helen back. And they needed Achilles, not because he volunteered, but because everyone knew without Achilles, the battlefield would tilt. And a tilted battlefield meant defeat, and defeat meant loss of honor. And honor, back then, was as essential as Wi-Fi is today. Achilles listened, didn't answer immediately. He just quietly looked down at his foot, the heel that never touched the waters of Styx. And he knew, whether he wanted to or not, he'd have to go, only on his own terms. Clue 3. The conversation with his mother. When warnings are not forbiddings. The night before leaving, Achilles walked to the beach, not to train, not to think, just to listen to the waves, the only thing that gave him no orders. And there, Thetis, his mother, appeared from the sea in the damp mist and cold moonlight. She didn't say, "Don't go," didn't say, "Stay with me." She simply said, "If you go, your name will live forever, but you won't." Achilles looked up, "And if I don't?" She stroked his hair like she used to, her hand soft, smelling of salt. "You'll live long," but they'll forget you, as if you never existed. No threats, only choices. And that's the hardest part, when your mother doesn't stop you from entering battle. She just stands at the shore, waving goodbye with eyes wetter than the sea. Clue 4. When you're too good to be allowed to be tired. Some people are born with talent, and they think talent will help them choose their lives. But Achilles quickly learned, talent is also a rope tying your ankle to obligation. He couldn't say, I need a break. He couldn't say, I don't want to kill. He couldn't say, I just want to live quietly, eat chicken porridge, and marry someone kind. No, he was too good. So they needed him on the battlefield. He was strong. So they needed him to carry what they couldn't. And slowly, Achilles stopped being a person. He became a symbol of victory. Maybe you've been like that too. Good, so you got more work. Quiet, so they thought you were strong. You didn't complain, so they assumed you were fine. And deep inside, you wanted to scream, I just want one day without pretending. Achilles didn't scream. He just laced his sandals, strapped on his shield, and walked forward. Not because he wanted to, but because, if not him, then who? Hephaestus forges armor, the gods forge, the breath of epic. No one prepares for war without picking out an armor. And if you're Achilles, your armor can't be an end-of-season clearance item. His armor wasn't made by mortal hands. It was forged in the deepest chamber of Olympus, where each hammer strike echoed into history. Hephaestus, god of the forge, wasn't someone easily pleased. He held fire in his hands and fate in his stare. Each blow from his hammer sent sparks flying, bending to ancient scripts no one dared translate. He shaped every layer of the armor as if rewriting the world's destiny. The breastplate, carved with stars and the sweeping wind of ancient battlefields. Left shoulder, divine beings shedding tears. Right shoulder, two lions clashing, a prophecy of civil war not yet fought. And in the center, where the heart would sit, not a symbol of victory, but the image of a child lifted from water, heel still dry. Hephaestus didn't ask what anyone wanted. He simply knew, this is for Achilles, and Achilles will wear nothing else. It was a creation of Hephaestus, god of smithing, of fire, and of being painfully perfectionist. Hephaestus didn't just make armor. He built a walking legend in metal. Each engraving on the armor was a line of epic poetry. Each panel reflected light like it was retelling the future. They say that when Achilles stepped onto the battlefield in his new armor, the sunlight moved aside, not wanting to outshine him further. No one wore that armor without feeling, like the center of every fate, and Achilles knew it. I am a symbol, and I must shine. Not just armor, but a shield of personality. Achilles' shield, not just for blocking attacks. It was a map of the world. A piece of art that also happened to stop spears from puncturing your chest. Hephaestus carved into it the cosmos, the harvest, mankind, and even a scene of two villagers arguing over a cow. It was so beautiful. If you were the enemy, you'd hesitate, admire it or dodge it. The feeling of wearing armor, from mortal to symbol. When Achilles donned the armor, lifted the shield, strapped the sandals, He looked like a living presentation slide sent to the battlefield. No longer the hesitant boy. No longer the one Patroclus reminded to hydrate after training. No longer the child who bowed his head as his mother spoke of death. Now he was someone wearing what history would name after him. Armor that even the other gods bowed to, not for its power, but for the weight of destiny it carried. Achilles stood before the bronze mirror, staring at the reflection in the polished metal, and for the first time, he didn't see himself. He saw a legend being born. Each piece wasn't heavy from iron, it was heavy from promises. The promise that, from this point on, every move he made would be watched, retold, carved into epic. No more room for hesitation, no place to fail. He took a deep breath, lifted his shield, and stepped forward. His ego now gold-plated and reinforced by societal expectation. With every step, the ground trembled slightly, not from weight, from the burden. And in that moment, Achilles knew, even before he killed anyone, he had already defeated being ordinary. How others saw that armor. They said when Achilles appeared on the battlefield, his armor arrived before the sound of his steps. Reflected light from his chest plate made Trojan soldiers squint. Some whispered, a god or a warning. On the Greek side, soldiers cheered inside. They didn't need strategy. Just seeing Achilles walk out made their hearts steady. Generals clapped each other on the back. With him, we can't lose. But from that moment on, Achilles could no longer sit by the fire with comrades. No one dared pat his back anymore. No one called his name like an ordinary man. He was spoken of like a force, not a person. And perhaps that was the shiniest loneliness ever to exist on a battlefield. In every epic, there is always a character who doesn't stand in the spotlight, but is the reason that light even exists. For Achilles, that person was Patroclus, not a god, not a prophet, not someone who bent fate with magic. Just someone who touched Achilles' heart gently and turned the course of a war. A friendship that needed no explanation. They didn't meet in some grand setting. They met in a dusty training camp where people were taught how to kill before they learned how to spell their names. Patroclus had been exiled for accidentally killing someone in a scuffle. Achilles was trained never to make that kind of mistake. One sought forgiveness, the other wasn't allowed to err. And strangely, they recognized each other, as if promised in a previous life. They grew up together. Not same class or shared desk kind of together. More like falling together, sword training together, eating saltless porridge together, then staring at each other when the world began to lose its patience. Patroclus wasn't stronger than Achilles. He wasn't faster, wasn't better with a blade, had no prophecy shielding him. But he had something Achilles could never manufacture. Gentleness that came not from pity, but from understanding. And that was enough. He was the one who told Achilles to rest, to eat, to live. Once, when Achilles got a minor injury, Patroclus didn't panic. He just said, "You're not immortal. Stop trying to prove otherwise." Patroclus wasn't chosen for battle, but he went anyway. The night before battle, Patroclus sat beside Achilles. No one talked about strategy. No one spoke of killing. Just two people, a bowl of water, and a silence deep enough to hear thoughts blowing through the mind. Achilles fell asleep, or pretended to, and Patroclus quietly stood up. He looked at the familiar armor, the one no one thought could be worn by anyone else. He gently touched the dimmed metal, as if apologizing or saying goodbye. This time, I'll have your back. The armor didn't quite fit. The sword was a little heavy, but his eyes were bright, and his footsteps steady, because some departures need no grand reason, just the inability to stay still any longer. When the Greeks began to lose ground, and Achilles refused to fight due to a conflict with Agamemnon, Patroclus watched the battlefield from afar and chose to put on Achilles' armor and step forward in his place. He knew he wasn't as strong. He knew he wasn't trained to win. But sometimes, not being able to stand by is a kind of courage. Patroclus wore the armor, stood beneath the sun, and everyone thought he was Achilles. Greek morale soared. And then Patroclus was killed, not by someone who hated him, but by Hector, who thought it was Achilles. When the armor fell, when his name was shouted in the enemy camp as a glorious trophy, just seconds later, they realized, no, that wasn't Achilles, but it was too late. The cheers had already echoed, the rumor had spread, and the worst part, Achilles didn't know yet. Somewhere else on the battlefield, someone still believed Patroclus would return. With a smile and a sentence that would make everything a little softer, no one dared tell Achilles, because no one knew what would be left after he knew. When you lose the one who reminded you you're still human. When Achilles heard Patroclus was dead, he didn't scream, he didn't flip a table, he didn't compose poetry. He went silent, a kind of silence that lowered the camp's temperature by a degree. Then Achilles put the armor back on, not for honor, not for glory, not for the gods, but for pain, for loss, because some losses are unforgivable. Achilles didn't cry. He just sat, fingers lightly clawing at the mud, as if trying to rewrite something. But no word would do. He remembered the afternoon they sat in the yard, saying nothing, just listening to fire crackle. He remembered Patroclus laughing because Achilles had tied his sandal lopsided. He remembered the soft words, "I'm not here to win. I'm here to remind you, not to forget you're human." Now Patroclus was gone, and Achilles knew. He had no more reason to be gentle. No one left to grab his hand when he got angry. No one to tap his shoulder and ask, "Have you had water?" And so Achilles put the armor back on, not to win, but to say to the world, "I once loved someone, and you killed him." A rage that doesn't scream, but destroys. The rage of Achilles didn't sound like a roar. It was more like a silence, too quiet to be safe. No one saw him smash things. No one heard him howl. They just saw. He put on his armor, slower than usual. Each time he tightened his sandal straps, it felt like he was locking something into place inside his chest. Each step, not heavy because of steel, but because of the questions that no longer had anyone to answer them. As he walked through the camp, the Greek soldiers paused. No one called his name, No one cheered, because everyone understood he wasn't heading into battle to represent them anymore. He was going out because the person he loved wasn't coming back. This was no longer combat. It was a farewell ritual, carried out by blade and cold, precise deaths. They say it didn't rain that day, because Achilles had shed enough blood to wet the ground. Some anger makes you yell, some makes you throw things, and some brings down cities. Achilles' fury wasn't an outburst. It was a slow freezing, a quiet erasure of compassion. That day, Achilles put on his armor, said nothing. No one dared say a word. The Greek army looked at him like they had just seen hope again, and the Trojans didn't understand why. The sky suddenly grew darker than usual. Achilles didn't enter the battlefield as a man. He entered as a warning. Each step a question that needed no answer. Who will pay for the name Patroclus? The battle began, and he didn't hide behind a shield, didn't wait for a signal, didn't need anyone to rally. He just charged, as if survival was optional, not to win, but to tear Troy apart, piece by piece. No one could count how many he struck down, because everyone was too busy running. And finally, Hector, the one who killed Patroclus, appeared. Achilles didn't look at him like an enemy. He looked at him like a door that needed to open, so the pain could end. The fated duel, Achilles and Hector. That duel needed no soundtrack, only the wind and the sound of armor falling. No introductions, no command to begin, no soldiers interfering. Just two men, two symbols, two sides of a single loss. Hector wasn't afraid. He knew he wouldn't survive, but he stood his ground. Because if he didn't, Troy would have nothing left to lift its head for. Achilles said nothing. Each breath moved him closer to the inevitable end. Both of them moved in silence, like two planets on a collision course, not fast, not slow, but terrifyingly precise. Achilles killed Hector, didn't say a word. He tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy. Dragging the body wasn't brutality, but the absence of language. To outsiders, it was barbaric. To Troy, a deep insult. But to Achilles, it was the only way left to say, "I'm hurting, and I don't know how else to show it." He didn't scream, didn't write poetry, didn't pray. He just tied Hector's body, dragged it through dust, past the eyes of men, through the outrage of the world, not to boast, but to survive every second, without choking on the memory of Patroclus. He had lost the best part of himself. And no one, not even Hector, could hold on to what remained of Achilles' goodness. The reactions from enemies, allies, and even the gods. After Achilles dragged Hector's body around the city, the battlefield fell quiet, as if someone had whispered a curse in slow motion. The Greeks, who once shouted his name, now didn't dare speak it. They quietly packed up, quietly watched, and quietly avoided Achilles' eyes. One soldier whispered, "I used to think he was a hero, but now he looks like a god that no longer wants to be worshipped." The Trojans wept, raged, but didn't dare come out, not because they feared being killed, but because they feared that touching Achilles now might awaken something worse than war. And on Olympus, the gods looked down, Athena tilted her head, said nothing. Zeus sighed like distant thunder. And Thetis, Achilles' mother, stood before the sea, didn't call her son, just dropped a single tear onto the waves, just one, and the whole ocean trembled. That wasn't a storm. It was a winter that would not thaw, and from then on, the name Achilles was never spoken softly again, only whispered with a bit of fear, a bit of reverence, and a bit of grief. Why he went to war even when he didn't want to. His name was Hector, and the first thing you should know about him is he didn't go to battle for glory. He went because no one else dared to. That morning, Hector didn't rally the troops. He didn't draw up clever strategies. He didn't wear a hero's mask. He just stood by the city wall, looked at the silent townspeople, at the trembling hands of young soldiers, at his wife holding their child, and at himself, then exhaled softly. If not me, then who? He turned to his brother. Deiphobus, I'm not going because I want to. I'm going because everyone's waiting for someone else not to run. The scene of Hector getting ready for battle. Hector didn't wear shiny god-forged armor. No divine protector appeared through a mist of glory. No thunder. No gleaming light like a mythical weapons commercial. He had a dented set of armor. The dent was from a previous battle, when he shielded a younger soldier. He picked up his old sword, its blade no longer sharp like his honor, but still firm enough to let him feel he had control over something. His mother gave him a small piece of hand-stitched cloth. His wife handed him a hard piece of bread. His son didn't know anything, just looked at his father with eyes that had never seen anyone fall. Hector saw all of it, said nothing, just lowered his head, tightened his sandals, and whispered to himself, "It's not what I carry that makes me brave. It's the reason I carry it." Hector's state of mind facing Achilles. Achilles was coming. No one said it, but everyone felt it in the air. The wind paused. The Greek soldiers held their breath. Troy tightened its gates, and Hector stood at the gates. He didn't hide, didn't pretend to be busy in a meeting. He knew he wasn't a match. He didn't hope for a happy ending, but he stood there because he understood something very simple. Everyone wants peace, but no one wants to open the door when death comes knocking. He saw Achilles from afar, the shining armor, the cold eyes, the reputation that burned ahead of his footsteps. And then, no greeting, no naming, the two of them lunged at each other, not out of hatred, not out of rivalry, but because it was the only thing they knew how to do. Some enter history through victory. Hector entered through a gaze that didn't flinch, and a sentence no one heard. "I don't need to win. I just need you to remember. I didn't turn away." After Hector fell, no applause, no cheers, no victory drum sounded. Only a strange emptiness spread from the place where Hector had fallen. On the side of Troy, a child looked up at his mother and asked, "Did my dad run?" The mother gripped his hand, eyes wet, but voice calm, as if reading what was already carved in her heart. "No, your father stood to the very end." On the battlefield, Greek soldiers didn't celebrate. Some dropped their swords mid-swing. Some pulled off their helmets, as if not wanting their eyes to carry that image forever. A warrior didn't win, but no one could bring themselves to call him a loser. And in a corner of the sky, a bird flew past, cried out 3 times, then soared forward, as if carrying an unspoken tribute. Anyone who's ever been a parent has heard the saying, being a mom is hard, it's no joke. But no one adds, being a divine mother is harder, because if you dip your kid wrong by just 1 inch, they'll end up in an epic for the next 1,000 years. Thetis, Achilles' mother, goddess of the sea, dipped her son in the river Styx to make him immortal. And she dipped him with 1 hand. That hand held his heel. That heel stayed dry. And 19 years later, a divine arrow flew straight into it. And if you're wondering, wait, why didn't she just flip him over and dip him again? Sorry, that rule hadn't been invented yet. Zeus was probably lurking nearby with thunder in hand. And maybe Thetis thought, who's going to hit the heel, really? And the universe replied, me. Paris, that prince who didn't even know how to hold a sword properly, now had Apollo guiding his hand, as tenderly as a preschool teacher drawing a straight line. The arrow flew in the right direction, flew straight toward the one spot Achilles had never touched the water of the Styx. Achilles fell. There was no glorious battle, just a small comma in the scroll of eternity. He didn't roar, didn't explain, just felt a sudden cold on his heel, and he knew. That's the spot. The Greek soldiers froze. They looked at each other, looked at the sky, looked at the earth, then lowered their heads, as if they'd just drunk the last cup of hope. Troy went dead silent, because no one knew whether to rejoice or brace for karma. Thetis, far away, at the edge of the Red Sea, felt it. She looked up, hands trembling, and simply whispered, I forged the armor, but I forgot the ankle insurance. And history doesn't offer compensation plans. From that day on, every Greek mother told her children, wear sandals when you go out, and never believe someone is truly invincible. Immortality lasts until every heel gets insured. Paris, the handsome prince who liked writing poetry and staring at mirrors, ended up making his mark in epic history with a single arrow, 1 shot, 1 kill, and a lifelong legacy of being haunted by it. No one knows when he practiced shooting. No one ever saw him on the front lines. He was the kind of guy who strolled behind the palace, chatted with birds, then suddenly got handed the mission to save all of Troy. And then, one day, thanks to an assist from Apollo, Paris shot Achilles, the man no one on the battlefield dared approach without writing a will first. That arrow wasn't glorious, but it hit the spot, the heel. History calls Achilles a legend. The Greeks called Paris lucky. Historians call it a fateful detail. But if you ask Patroclus, he might have just sighed. Really, 1 kill, 0 skill. Paris didn't gloat, didn't raise his hand, didn't celebrate, because maybe he knew. I just punctuated the end of a song whose melody I never understood. And in the end, Paris didn't become a great king, didn't become an undefeated warrior, didn't become a mythical symbol of love. He just became the guy who fired the arrow, a short line in an epic as long as winter. Maybe he wasn't good at fighting. Maybe he didn't even hold a shield correctly, but he was there, at the right moment, and became the reason Achilles' light went out. One shot, one fall, and a legend that would never stand up again. Achilles didn't die because Paris was skilled. He didn't die because Apollo hated him. And it wasn't because fate was too cruel. He died because there was one spot his mother once thought was strong enough to keep him from dying. People often call it the fatal heel, but to be more accurate, it should be called the quietest corner of love, where a mother's hand held gently, where the magic water didn't touch, where fate had been patiently waiting for 19 years. No one blames Thetis. She did what any mother could. But like every mother, she was just one heartbeat too slow and had to carry the weight of centuries of rewritten history. Achilles was strong, but even the strongest have places they can't guard themselves. A place they have to trust someone else to hold for them. And when that place breaks, it's not because they're weak, but because no one lives without once trusting someone to hold them in the right place. From Thetis's view, the one who didn't know if she was forgiving or blaming herself. Thetis stood by the sea, no longer wearing golden armor, no longer calling fish to make wave pillows for her child like she used to, just silence, facing the sunset where the wind blew, but couldn't carry her son's voice. She didn't cry, because her tears were once used to craft the magic water. Her son wasn't immortal, but she had poured all her helplessness into trying. She said nothing, just placed a finger on the water, and where she touched, the waves pulled back, not out of reverence, but because they didn't know what to do when they touched a mother's mistake. Patroclus, the one who stood beside him like a shadow. Patroclus always knew Achilles wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why he loved Achilles more than anyone who ever praised him. "A dry heel, huh?" he once asked. Achilles laughed. "It's fine. As long as you're here, no one will hit it." And then they hit it, and he wasn't here. If Patroclus could say one last thing, maybe he wouldn't say, "I'm sorry." He would say, "I get it. Everyone has a place they can't touch, that they have to trust someone else to protect. I wish that hand had been mine." A warrior not perfect, but still loved. Achilles was no longer the flawless icon, no longer immortal, no longer steel without a scratch. He was someone who had once been cradled in the trembling hands of a mother, someone who stepped out for love, not glory, someone who once believed he could remain whole. And when he fell, it wasn't because he was weak, but because he had lived real enough to trust someone to hold him. They held a funeral for Achilles as if he were a god, but a god who had just broken. The pyre was built high, burning bright as if to touch the sky. His armor was set aside, still gleaming as if waiting to be worn again. His sword lay across his chest, as if someone only had to call his name, and he would rise, and everyone was silent. No speeches, no list of victories, only the sound of wind and the soft sobs of those who once believed Achilles was unbreakable. The heel, the part left out of the eulogy. Everyone knew Achilles died because of his heel, but throughout the funeral that stretched longer than a king's childhood, no one mentioned it. Not a word, not a note, not a single line of biography. Only one poet whispered, if he had dodged death, he wouldn't be immortal. A nearby general shook his head. If we bring it up, we'll make him look like just a man. So they wept, for the warrior, for glory, for the prophecy, for a song never finished, but no one cried for the dry heel. Because death doesn't come from where we're strongest. It comes from where we thought we were safe. The looks that needed no words. Thetis sat still the whole ceremony, hands steady, eyes dry. She had already cried when he fell. Someone wanted to ask, why not dip a bit more? But they didn't, because funerals are no place to blame the hand that once held her child. Patroclus gave no speech. He just stood beside and placed a small stone near the pyre, right where he once gently touched Achilles' heel and asked, "Here." No one brought it up again, but everyone knew. Every legend carries a scar that never made it into the books. A funeral that felt like he was still watching. That funeral didn't feel like a ritual. It felt like collective breath holding. No one rushed. No one dropped anything. Everyone moved gently, as if Achilles were lying there, eyes closed, but would open if someone made a sound. Someone wiped his sword beside his body, though they knew it wouldn't be drawn again. Another brushed off the dirt from his armor's shoulder, then placed it back, like he was going to wear it for one more battle. They didn't speak much, just nodded, as if the movements had been rehearsed for years. Who enters, who stands, who steps back. Everything as if written into their shared memory. If Achilles sees this, he'd be okay with it. Someone placed his sandals neatly at his feet, though everyone knew Achilles didn't need shoes anymore. But they did it anyway, because he once said, "Don't let my stuff get kicked around." No one shouted his name. No one read his victories, just the light clinking of armor and gazes falling, like unspoken apologies. The heel was wrapped, not to hide, but to honor. No one spoke of the heel, but everyone looked. Not out of curiosity, but because it was the one place no one dared touch, yet everyone wanted to leave something. An old soldier, whose name no one remembered, stepped forward. He knelt, said nothing, silently unfolded a white cloth, folded it in thirds, and gently wrapped it around Achilles' heel. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough to cover the place where death had entered. No one asked why. No one stopped him, because they all knew that place shouldn't be left exposed forever, not out of shame, but because if we stare too long, we're reminded that even the perfect can be slightly missed. From that day forward, at funerals, no one looked down anymore. They looked up, as if Achilles had never had a heel. A mother's last lullaby from someone who knew her voice wouldn't be heard again. Thetis did not cry. She had crossed the ocean, past cliffs, and came to the ashes, as if one breath more would let her touch memory again. She sat there, spoke to no one, kept no ceremony, didn't scream at the gods. She only looked at the son who once lay in her arms and whispered an old lullaby. one no one else knew, one sung only once, to a child half dipped in myth. He who dipped me could not hold me forever. She who once held me would someday lose her grip. And if the wind takes me, please say this: I was once called by love, not by fear. No one heard the full song, only her voice rippling like soft waves on a dead sea. No echo, but those nearby felt their throats close. She did not finish the lullaby, because he had left before the last note, a line left out of history. The storyteller, perhaps a poet, a soldier who lived, or someone who once saw Achilles tie his sandal, was given one task: write the biography, let the world remember. And so they wrote, of battles, of blinding armor, of fame that made enemies step back, of a love that needed no explanation, of a rage that made gods move aside. But when they reached the heel, their pen stopped, not for lack of words, not for lack of fact, but because some wounds are not meant to be framed into letters. And so, in the manuscripts of history, in Homer's verses, in Troy's lullabies, no one wrote, Achilles died because of his heel. They only wrote, Achilles, the great warrior, left this world after one arrow. The arrow flew true, but where it landed shall remain unnamed. Because sometimes, to let someone live forever, you must forgive them a single line of weakness. Achilles, once called invincible, is now remembered by just 2 words: heel tendon. Not warrior, not blade of steel, not keeper of the fire in the epic, but careful, that's your Achilles. Don't expose your heel. Everyone has their own Achilles. You once fell, and people looked at the spot you fell, then pointed at it to name their own fear. No one calls Achilles by what he lived through, but by the part he couldn't save himself. They forgot the way he looked at Patroclus falling asleep one last time, forgot the way he stood in the middle of an army without trembling hands, forgot the whisper in the night, if I'm not here tomorrow, you know where I went. But they remember the heel, not because they're cruel, but because this world has a habit of naming what it can't control. And if you're great enough to fall, then that fall will no longer be yours. It'll be quoted, it'll be repurposed, it'll become a metaphor. When your name becomes a general term for a wound, long ago, Achilles was a person's name. Now, it's a concept, a psychological catchphrase. That's my Achilles. Everyone has one. Don't let anyone see yours. And so, the name once whispered by Patroclus each morning now appears in textbooks, in healing podcasts, and in chapter 12 of a romance novel. No one says he was the one who stood among thousands without shaking. No one remembers he once said, I don't need to live forever. I just need someone to remember I once loved for real. Now they remember, sure, but not out of love, out of fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear that they too have, a part that wasn't dipped deep enough. The name Achilles, once shouted like a war trumpet, is now just a cautious footnote. Don't end up like him. Patroclus, the one who knew the heel before the arrow did. Patroclus knew Achilles wasn't perfect. He didn't need a mythology scroll to see it. He just had to watch Achilles tie his shoes crooked on the first cold morning. Just had to notice how Achilles feared letting people down, more than dying. He knew that heel never touched the sticks, knew it was dry, but he wasn't afraid, because he thought, no one's stupid enough to hit that exact spot. And if they were, he'd be standing in the way. But that day, he wasn't. And now, people name Achilles by the exact spot Patroclus once teased. He remembers placing his hand on that heel and asking, "Here?" Achilles had smiled. "Yeah, if they shoot me there, tell them it's cheating." Now they name the pain after him. Patroclus isn't angry, just sad that the world chose to keep the one spot Achilles was fragile and forgot he was gentle in all the rest. The storyteller and a line they didn't dare write. The historian sat before the parchment, reed pen in hand, ink ready, but his fingers stalled on the last line. Above, he had written it all. Victory lists, names of the fallen. Days Troy still stood. The last things Achilles said to the wind. Just one line left. Cause of death. He looked at the ashes, the broken sword, the untouched sandals, and thought, if I write heel, they'll forget everything else. But if he didn't write it, future readers wouldn't understand how such a warrior fell without a clash of blades. So in the end, he scratched out some words and just wrote, Achilles fell to a place everyone has, but only he is remembered for. The pen trembled, not from wind, but because some truths aren't meant to be written plainly, just so someone might finally rest. Everyone has a soft spot. Some hide it in their eyes. Some tuck it behind a joke. Some wear armor, but expose just one small real piece that no one sees except bad luck. And so, when that part gets touched, they collapse. Not because they're weak, not because they're foolish, but because people are like that. You can be strong in 99 ways, but the world will remember the one way you fell. They won't say your name while you stand. Only when you're down will they call it out, and sometimes just to say, that's my weakness too. If you're carrying an Achilles heel, a thing no one knows, a fear you hide, a story half told, don't rush to feel broken. You're just human, like Achilles, like anyone who's ever been loved, then crumbled because they trusted someone to hold the right spot. No one is born without a mistake. Achilles didn't fall from a critical blow, not from a stronger enemy, not because the battlefield was too brutal. He died because one patch of skin wasn't dipped in a magic river, because his mother held on too tightly. Sound familiar? You too. Me too. Some wounds don't come from hate, but from hands that once loved us too much. A well-meant don't cry, be strong. A disappointed glance when we didn't meet expectations. A tug too fast that left behind something we weren't ready to let go. No one meant to make us fragile, but no one can protect every inch of us either. So you grow up with a soft spot. No one sees it. But you know, you work, you love, you hold it all together, except for one moment when someone accidentally touches the old bruise. You falter, not because you're weak, but because part of you was once held with love, but not quite held enough. Your name is not where you fell. They call Achilles heel, not because that's where he failed, but because the world doesn't know how to remember someone without labeling them. People remember your pain before your perseverance. Few are patient enough to hold the full version of you. You've been called by the name of your past pain, the dropout, the betrayed one, the depressed one, the failure. And sometimes you call yourself that too, but that's not your name. Your name isn't the place you fell. It's every time you stood up after. Your name is the time you didn't quit, the time you said sorry first, the time you learned to trust again, the time you stayed quiet so you wouldn't hurt someone, the time you cried and still showed up to work. They may point to your weak spot, but you. Don't forget to point to your quiet strength. You weren't born to be an example of pain. You were born to be proof that even your softest part can still go on living. If Achilles lived today, he'd just want to wear shoes and be left. Alone, if Achilles lived now, he probably wouldn't be a hero. No talk shows, no healing from trauma workshops. He'd quietly work in a warehouse, wear a hoodie, ride the bus, and wear high-top sneakers. Not to hide, but just not to be reminded. If someone spotted him and asked, "Hey, aren't you that guy with the heel thing?" He'd chuckle. "Yeah, but it's healed now, and I'm living a life that's very hero-free." He'd eat a cold sandwich for lunch, file taxes, smile awkwardly at strangers in elevators. And if one night you sat next to him at a bus stop, he might tilt his head and whisper, "I used to be immortal, but now I just want peace. And if someone remembers my heel used to hurt, I hope they leave it alone." Because even someone written into epic poems deserves to step out of them, to live like an ordinary person, with a wound that doesn't need to be named anymore. Next, we come to the story. Athena, goddess of wisdom. If you've ever seen someone born with CEO energy, Athena is the original prototype, not just born with it. She burst out of someone else's forehead. Specifically, Zeus's forehead. Yes, the father of all things on Olympus. He didn't go to a maternity ward. He went to a surgery room with an axe. The story begins with Metis, the goddess of wisdom and cleverness. On a fine day, well, not so fine, Zeus heard a rumor from Gaia. If Metis gave birth to a son, that child would overthrow Zeus, just like Zeus overthrew his own father. And Zeus, in a very Zeus kind of move, decided, better swallow the mom to be safe. Yup, not parenting, not co-parenting, but eating the mother and the child, as if that would erase the prophecy. Classic Zeus logic. Everything seemed fine for the moment. Metis lay silently inside Zeus's belly, still pregnant, and while in there, she kept thinking, kept teaching her child, kept crafting things. And so Athena was conceived inside her father's mind, absorbing divine wisdom and marinating in chronic stress hormones. Imagine living inside the body of a control-freak god, with no windows, no internet, and thunder echoing through his stomach all day. Metis, the goddess of thought, kept working. She breathed through logic, meditated via strategy, and literally wove cloth using Zeus's nerve fibers. Mornings, yoga on the pancreas. Afternoons, reading by the gallbladder. Evenings, bedtime stories for baby Athena, told in alpha waves through Zeus's spine. Some scholars believe that this prenatal cranial education is the reason Athena came out speaking fluent Greek, standing straight, and absolutely hating inefficiency. The Olympus emergency room. Then one day, Zeus started having a headache. Not the mild pressure type, but the "my brain is about to explode. Somebody do something" kind. Olympus called for emergency care. The whole scene looked like a sitcom. Apollo wrote a prescription. Hermes suggested an herbal forehead massage. Dionysus offered wine. A little buzz will fix it. Hera stood with arms crossed, glaring at Zeus like, "I told you not to eat random things." Only Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, a guy who doesn't do well sitting still, stepped forward with an axe. No anesthesia, no intubation, just wham. Axe to Zeus's forehead. A metallic sound echoed like summer thunder. All of Olympus held its breath. And then, boom, Athena appeared, burst out like a lightning bolt, wearing armor, holding a spear, eyes wide open, no crying, no wailing, just her first words, "I'm ready." Expansion Suggestion 3. The universe's first slow-motion moment. If a director filmed this scene, it would be the first slow-motion shot in mythological history. Athena, emerging from Zeus's forehead, not like a child, but like a high-resolution brand icon. Everything seemed to pause. Wind blew her hair backward, even though there were no windows. A perfectly fitting helmet fell onto her head as if by destiny. A deep, steady voice, as if she had just stepped out of a TED Talk on cosmic strategy. Light from Zeus's forehead illuminated Athena's face, a 45-degree angle, armor reflecting the orbit of Venus. Hephaestus stepped back, both confused and nodding in admiration. The other gods? No one dared speak. Only Dionysus exhaled a single phrase, "Holy wine." From afar, Hermes recorded the event on the timeline with the note, "Athena, born, already overqualified." It was the first time people didn't know whether to applaud or bow, and perhaps also the first time Zeus, the most powerful god, had to step back, make way for a new being, brand new, but clearly didn't need any user manual. No one understood what had just happened. Even Zeus was a bit stunned. He had just given birth to himself. The newborn daughter was already in business attire. This wasn't a being. This was a living PowerPoint. From then on, Athena officially joined the list of characters. No childhood, no need to learn to crawl, and never swaddled. She was born amidst the universe's headache, and from that day on, always ready to handle others' headaches, with wisdom, with reason, and occasionally with a spear. If you're tossing and turning because your head is filled with too many thoughts, remember, Athena was too. She once lived entirely inside someone's head for 9 months, and instead of going mad, she emerged with sparkling armor, a clear gaze, and a psyche as solid as the Parthenon. Expansion Suggestion 4. Zeus's mild psychological aftershock. After that historic explosion, people thought Zeus would proudly say, "That's my daughter." But no. He stood frozen for a few minutes, still holding his forehead, eyes shimmering as if he just watched an independent French psychological film. Zeus, the god once famous for lightning speed, decisiveness, and a bit of infidelity, suddenly fell silent. Some gods whispered, "He's in shock." For the first time, someone better than him didn't need to sleep with anyone. Since that day, Zeus showed slight changes. No more swallowing anyone. Read more books, started meditating. One night, Hera saw him standing alone on the balcony, gazing at the stars and sighing, "My daughter, quite a strong start." From then on, whenever someone mentioned Athena in front of Zeus, he would smile, then blink, then quickly change the subject like he used to, dodge responsibilities. Athena never brought up the born by axe story again. But every time she looked at Zeus during divine meetings, she tilted her head slightly, and he usually left the room to check on the thunder. Perhaps among the myriad things Zeus couldn't control, Athena was the first and only one he didn't dare call a mistake. Athena doesn't fall in love. She doesn't date. She doesn't swipe on Tinder. She doesn't cry into a mug of cider like a heartbroken version of Aphrodite. Not because she's not beautiful. She is. But it's the kind of beauty that makes people want to stand at attention, not hand over flowers. She's one of the 3 officially recognized virgin goddesses, along with Artemis and Hestia. But if Artemis is "I need personal space," and Hestia is "I love my hearth more than any man," Athena is "I'm busy mentoring 12 heroes who can't figure out how to slay dragons, managing a city, writing law books, leading military strategy, and designing Bronze Age STEM curriculum. No time for love." If you were an ancient Greek guy thinking about hitting on Athena, you'd receive a stare like an X-ray. Does your sentence have any logical structure? A calm correction. You just used the wrong clause. And if you were bold enough to bring her flowers, she'd look at the bouquet like it was a flawed replica of a tactical defense plan. The issue isn't that Athena hates love. She just doesn't believe it's an equation with a proven solution. Athena versus the goddess love squad. If there were a divine tea party among goddesses, Aphrodite would say, "Love is everything." Hera would snap, "Love is a legally binding commitment." Persephone would whisper, "Love is hell, but warm." Athena, she'd gently set down her tea and ask, "Have any of you ever drafted a prenuptial agreement?" Not because she wants to ruin the fun. She just likes asking questions that make people stop mid-sip. And when they ask, "What about you?" she responds, "I prefer to invest in sustainable social infrastructure." And that's the end of the party. Other gods love, then rage, cheat, sulk, and swear eternal oaths like a Greek soap opera. Athena, she prefers quiet, meetings with agendas, timelines that don't slip. Maybe she once loved someone? Maybe. But if she did, he didn't know. Because Athena hides her feelings like she hides her backup weapon. They say Hephaestus once misread the signals, and Athena responded by birthing a new god from her thigh just to skip the drama. Sounds wild. In Greek mythology, that's considered mild if you're the type who leaves emotional texts on read, if you've been called too rational, if you've ever picked overtime over a weekend date. Welcome. You've got some Athena in you. And if someone asks, "Why don't you love anyone?" just smile and say, "When Athena watches love from afar." One night, Athena stood atop the Parthenon, looking down at a couple beneath an olive tree. They laughed. They touched. They had no defensive strategy. She didn't feel envy. She didn't sigh. She just noted it. Somewhere inside, she wondered, How do they function without an emotional tracking spreadsheet? The night wind brushed her helmet. Athena placed a hand over her chest, felt nothing unusual, just a faint sound, like a hammer tapping on an Excel sheet. She turned away, leaving the lovers in the moonlight, and returned to her meeting. Athena doesn't need to fall in love to understand it. She simply chooses to stand outside of it, like a night guard, alert, respectful, and not interfering unless necessary. So if you've ever seen others happy and didn't feel jealous, just calm, maybe, deep down, Athena is standing inside you too. She's just not saying it, because she's busy checking your internal progress report. Athena and the love letter with red pen edits. The first to write a poem for Athena was Hermes. He assumed a smooth talker could charm anyone. Hermes sent the poem. Athena received it. She didn't reply. 3 days later, Hermes got the same scroll back with grammar corrections. In the margins, mixed metaphor, incorrect verb tense, line 3. My heart is overused. Recommend vocabulary variation. After that, no one dared write Athena fanfic again. They feared getting a formal critique on their narrative structure. If you've ever written a text as long as a thesis and got ghosted and didn't feel sad, just wanted to revise your sentence structure, Athena gets you. And she would silently highlight where you used really twice in one sentence. Athena's not cold. She just cares deeply about syntax, and sometimes the way she responds to affection is to send you back a PDF with tracked changes. Athena didn't rush into battle like Ares. She didn't shapeshift into a swan to seduce people like Zeus. She didn't hand out freebies like Hermes. She mentored, she trained, she guided step by step, like a startup mentor who knows the failure rate is 98%, but still reads the pitch deck. Odysseus, her favorite student, she taught him how to lie effectively, how to sail through storms without dying, and, most importantly, how to survive a Cyclops dinner party. Perseus? Athena lent him a shield to reflect Medusa. He returned it with a thank you note. Heracles, loud, muscular, and a bit destructive, but Athena still helped him through several divine tasks. She didn't say much. She just stood in the back, occasionally adjusting the arc of his club. Athena is the kind of person who doesn't need the spotlight, but she's the reason the whole team survives. You know that character who writes the whole report but lets the boss sign it? That's her. You thought Greek heroes came up with their own strategies? No, they had Athena and a support team behind the scenes with whiteboards, attack diagrams, and backup ropes. No one took victory selfies with Athena. She didn't appear in glory murals. But if you look closely, every sword swing that hit its mark, every plan with more than a 12% success rate had her fingerprints on it. A mentor doesn't need glory, just a team that stays alive. If you've ever quietly helped someone fix their presentation at 2A, rewrote code for a group project, or submitted a strategy deck with someone else's name on top, Athena gets it. Because success doesn't need a name on it, as long as people survive to tell the tale. Side note 1. Athena as an invisible tech support system. You know the feeling. You're about to walk into a monster's cave, hands shaking, brain blank, heart pounding, and then a voice inside your head. Don't look into its eyes. Use the shield. Step left first. That's not intuition. That's Athena. She doesn't appear like a thunder god. She's the background software update at 3A mem that saves your life. Odysseus once said, "I escaped the Cyclops with cleverness." Athena, behind the scenes, holding an escape room diagram, softly smiled, close enough. Perseus got praised for staring down Medusa. Actually, he looked at a shield, polished by Athena to the perfect reflective angle. Heracles carried the world on his back. Athena carried the plan to keep him from dropping it. Side note. 2. Athena, Bronze Age project manager. You think Athena just wielded a spear? Nope. She understood Gantt charts. Every mythic campaign, from boar hunts to sea monster slaying, had Athena mapping roles and responsibilities. Who's the lead? Who's the backup if the lead gets swallowed? Who's bringing rope? Who just needs to not make things worse? She assigned roles with precision. You hold Medusa's head steady. You stand still, but heroically. You stay quiet, but your silence is crucial. Athena doesn't shout. She doesn't wave scepters. She says something once, and you know you don't want to hear it twice. Rumor has it she once printed post-campaign evaluation forms for the whole Golden Fleece team. Miss the deadline. You lose mythological honor points. You wonder why Greek heroes could work together without killing each other. That's Athena. With clear schedules, fair lunch breaks, and the ability to charm even the background characters. If you've ever done the group work, made the folder, organized the drive, wrote the post copy, then let someone else get the credit, Athena sees you. And if there's ever a team debrief, she'll sit down, quietly open the PowerPoint, and click on the first slide titled simply, "Again." Side note. 3. Athena doesn't solo. She holds the team together. While Ares charged into battle like an uncensored remix, Poseidon triggered tsunamis without even sending a warning email. And Zeus, well, he was busy turning into various animals to flirt with mortals. Athena was the only one asking, what problem are we solving? And who's monitoring the aftermath? She didn't believe in lone hero glory. She believed in teamwork, with checklists, 2-day prep meetings, and backup files. You won't see Athena standing at the center of the battlefield like the war-crazed gods, but you will see them all facing the same direction, toward Athena, nodding silently. She didn't ride into the fire on a horse. She leaned over a map, pointed to a tiny dot. Right here, if it falls, the whole plan collapses. No one argued, because the one time someone did was the last time they were mentioned in mythology. Athena is not the name you remember first, but if she's not there, everything falls apart. Have you ever heard the story of a young girl named Arachne? She wasn't a princess. She had no divine protector. She didn't know magic. She just had a pair of hands that could weave and a mouth that was a bit reckless. Arachne was so skilled that people in her village whispered she must have learned her craft from Athena. And instead of smiling and saying thank you, she snapped back, "Learned what? I came up with this myself." And just like that, Olympus sensed there was something to handle. Athena, who spent her days mentoring heroes, drafting defense strategies, checking emotional deadlines, suddenly had to come down to earth just to check on a girl, weaving. But she didn't come with armor and a spear. She arrived disguised as an old woman, white hair, thin hands, raspy voice. Athena gently warned, "My dear, talent should walk hand in hand with humility." Arachne looked at her, shrugged. "This is me being humble. If I were bragging, those goddesses would be too embarrassed to touch a needle." And with that, the gentle tone was gone. Athena revealed herself. No screaming, no holding grudges. She simply said one sentence, "Then let's compete." A weaving contest began. No audience, no judge, no live stream, just two figures, an ageless goddess and a teenage girl, and two looms squeaking like nerves about to snap. Athena wove images of the gods, noble, dignified, radiant. Arachne. She wove scenes of Zeus turning into a bull, a swan, a golden shower to seduce mortals. Each thread she pulled wasn't just beautiful, it was accurate. So accurate that Athena had to squint. When both finished, Athena stood. No one spoke. The wind paused. The light changed hue. A bird flew by, silent, weird. Athena stared at Arachne's tapestry for a long time, then tore it apart, not because it was ugly, but because it told the truth, and with flawless composition. Then, without any proclamation, Athena reached out, touched Arachne's forehead, and the girl became a spider. Since then, all spiders know how to weave, and none of them talk too much anymore. This wasn't a tale of punishment. It was about what happens when you're right, at a time no one's ready to hear the truth. Arachne wasn't transformed because she was good. She was transformed because she dared to say, "Even gods get it wrong." And she said it through perfect double-thread technique. If you've ever spoken up with something true, only to be asked to leave the meeting, if you've offered honest feedback, then got stared at like you just ruined the vibe, or if you've ever been undervalued for getting things right too fast, Athena sees you, and maybe, for just a split second, she looked at you and thought, that spider's got skill. There's a city so famous the whole world knows its name. Athens. That's right. Named after Athena, not Zeus, not Poseidon, not Olympus city, but Athena, because she won a contest. Back then, the entire region of Attica was unclaimed territory. People were suffering, crops failed, the sea was furious, and the gods, they all wanted the land. Zeus, instead of being a fair referee, said, "Okay, whoever gives the most useful gift, the people will decide." Poseidon, the god of the sea, riding seahorses, always flexing power, slammed his trident into the ground. A fountain burst out. Everyone cheered until they tasted it. Ugh, it's salty. What did Athena do? No thunder, no light show. She walked over, picked a high spot of land, and planted a seed. From that grew the very first olive tree, not grand, not loud, just quietly useful. People used the fruit to eat, leaves for medicine, the trunk for building homes. Olive oil, used for cooking, moisturizing skin, and frying mythical fish. The Council of Attica looked at both gifts. One was a fountain that tasted like whale tears. The other, a silent tree casting shade. No need for a vote. People nodded. We'll take the one that doesn't make us thirsty. Poseidon was pissed. He summoned a tsunami, roared. But Athena stood in the plains, unmoved, and the wave stopped. Not because she struck it down, but because the olive tree behind her wasn't tall yet, and she didn't want it to drown. From then on, the city was named after Athena, not because she was strong, but because she thought ahead. Not because people feared her, but because people understood her. Not because she gave more, but because she gave right. After the olive tree sprouted, the people of Attica didn't throw a parade or riot in celebration. They just nodded. A small, slow, thoughtful nod. Like when you look at the electricity bill and realize who's the responsible cook in the house. Poseidon wasn't happy. He didn't say anything. Just stood by his fountain and stared at the olive tree like it was a minimalist design he couldn't comprehend. I gave them the sea. Yes, but they needed fish frying oil. And if you noticed, from that day forward, Poseidon never entered another gift contest. He just made waves and hoped someone would get the message. Athena. She didn't make a victory speech, didn't pose for the win. She just bowed to the people and planted a second tree in the plaza, in case the first one gets bugs. That's Athena. She doesn't win by volume. She wins by utility. You think leadership requires eloquence, modernity, creativity. Athena won with cooking oil. And sometimes that's the only thing keeping a civilization from burning the pan. If you've ever done something small, quietly, unglamorous, and 5 years later people ask, wait, who came up with this? Then you get Athena. And if you planted something no one noticed, but the whole neighborhood now shares its shade, then you've just won a contest too. No divine water required, just the right moment and knowing what grows in this soil. Have you ever had a terrible day? No one replied to your messages. No one asked if you were okay. Everyone just assumed you were strong and you pulled yourself back up. No one caught you. No one cheered. Just one tiny thought in your head said, focus, you've gotten through worse. That's not you being strong. That's maybe Athena just passed by, didn't leave behind a miracle, just left one question. You're using the wrong resources. You think gods are here to grant favors. No, at least not Athena. She doesn't show up when you're screaming. She shows up when you finally sit down to rework the problem. Not like Zeus, arriving in thunder, or Ares, arriving in the sound of clashing steel. Athena shows up as a gentle question in your head. Are you sure you're fighting the right thing? When Odysseus got lost, Athena didn't snap her fingers to open a path. She handed him a map. No GPS, no voice directions, just a faint red ink trail, and the belief that, if he really reads it carefully, he'll see. When Perseus planned to behead Medusa, Athena didn't strike for him. She gave him a shield, polished it, and said, use reflection, not instinct. When Heracles moaned, I'm not strong enough, she didn't say, I believe in you. She gave him a checklist, clearly bullet-pointed. Final item, reassess motivation before lifting anything over 200 kilo. Athena doesn't save the world. She helps you realize you already have the tools, but you've been looking in the wrong drawer. If you've ever had no one to comfort you, but suddenly remembered a thought in your head that made you feel better, or ever had a panic, and your hands instinctively reached for a backup Excel file, then maybe Athena just passed through your head for 0.5 seconds, left no trace, just a breeze direction. Because sometimes the most necessary God isn't the one who hugs you while you cry, but the one who silently leaves a sticky note next to your keyboard with the words, "You forgot to turn on the filter." Have you ever been in a room full of people and you're the only one who remembered to bring a power strip? That's Athena every day on all of Olympus. The other gods have personalities, very obvious ones. Zeus is busy loving, Poseidon is busy sulking, Ares likes fighting, Apollo likes listening to his own music, and Athena? She's busy, keeping everything from collapsing. She doesn't join the drinking parties, doesn't argue in divine meetings, doesn't file complaints about the most mentioned in poetry ranking. She shows up on time, does the job, leaves when it's done. No glory needed. Just a system that works. People think Athena is cold. She's not. She's just more awake than the rest. When one god is raging, another is weeping, and another is writing chaotic love poems. She's at the stone desk, writing reports. The problem isn't people, it's the strategy. When Olympus broke into a huge argument over a golden apple, Athena didn't fight for it. She stepped back, let the drama unfold between the three beauties, and silently jotted everything down in her notebook. This is why beauty-based marketing campaigns are a bad idea. She's the only one who never demanded a big temple, never asked for a gold-plated statue, just requested a quiet place to read and develop border defense plans. She doesn't flaunt power. She manages consequences. If you've ever been the only one who kept a cool head in a panicked group, the one checking files while everyone's debating team t-shirt colors, the one sending documents before the deadline no one asked for, you get Athena. She doesn't do more than others. She just wakes up when others are dreaming. Expansion suggestion. 1. Divine meeting room. Athena is the only one with a printout. Olympus meets once a month. In theory. In practice, it's a high-level emotional support group. Zeus arrives late. Hera is annoyed. Hermes checks his phone. Dionysus passes out into his wine cup. Apollo plays background music for himself. Ares brings weapons into the meeting even though it clearly says no arms allowed. Athena, she brings a pen, a printout, and a highlighter. She starts the meeting with, "We are solving old problems with old solutions. Should we consider new thinking?" The room falls silent. No one knows what she means. No one dares to ask. She speaks little, but every time she does, people immediately feel the need to revise their life plans. And after the meeting, Zeus forgets the conclusion. Apollo asks, "Wait, what was this meeting for again?" Ares suggests a brawl to vote. Only Athena quietly sends a follow-up email with a AGES XLSX file, color-coded tabs included. If you've ever been the only one to schedule a meeting, the only one reminding people of deadlines, and the only one staying calm when the group starts arguing over the team mascot, congrats. You've inherited a bit of Olympus DNA. the kind that goes to meetings with gods and still brings attendance sheets and summary notes. Athena misses one meeting. Olympus falls apart a little. One time, Athena caught a cold, not from a virus, but from attending 12 straight meetings where no one used punctuation. She missed just one meeting, and that's when Olympus realized, oh, so Athena is the hinge keeping this meeting room from crashing into Earth. Hermes sent the wrong invite, inviting a whole monster gang to a peace conference. Ares misunderstood the agenda, thought it was war demo, showed up with an army. Dionysus threw an impromptu buffet, resulted in mild food poisoning across the poetry committee. Apollo got mad at Hera for not listening to his new track, accidentally cursed the Olympus Bluetooth speaker. Zeus, nowhere to be found, probably shapeshifted into a shark, looking for creative inspiration, and at the end of the day, someone carved a note into the central temple's stone board. Athena, please come back. We can't find the original file. If you've ever taken a break from a group for a day and came back to find they used the wrong plan, forgot to save the file, and were blaming each other with emojis. You understand how Athena felt that day. She wasn't mad. She just rebuilt the system from scratch. This time, she gave editing rights to the right people, and clearly wrote in the email, "Do not delete the summary tab. I spent time on it." Athena and the answers no one dares to ask. On Olympus, there's one unspoken rule. Don't ask Athena unless you're ready for the truth. She doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't offer comfort for show, doesn't answer to make you feel better. Hermes once asked, "Do you think I should start a podcast?" Athena replied, "If you fix your pronouns, avoid repetition, and slow down a bit, still no." Dionysus asked, "What did you think of my flaming wine performance last night?" She replied, "It clearly demonstrates why the mythical economy isn't growing." Even Zeus, the master of blame dodging, once froze when Athena said straight to his face, "History won't call that great. They'll call it a series of deliberate HR violations." So when Athena speaks, everyone in the meeting room holds their breath, not out of fear, but because she's usually right, and nothing hurts more than realizing you haven't thought deeply enough. If you've ever told the truth and made people uncomfortable, ever offered well-founded counterpoints and got labeled cold, ever answered, "What do you think of me?" with honesty, you understand Athena. And you also know, sometimes wisdom doesn't have to shout. It just needs to be right and stand there in silence, watching you. Reflect. Chapter 8. A windless night in Athens. When a goddess passed by without leaving a footprint, no one saw her arrive, no one saw her leave. Only the wind stopped blowing, the olive leaves stopped swaying, and the whole city grew so silent you could hear yourself think. That day, there was no meeting, no prayer, no battle, no rumor, just that. Athena passed through Athens, no armor, no spear, just wearing a grey cloak, eyes straight ahead as if listening to a faint melody inside the soul of the city. She granted no miracles, erected no new statues, did not say, "I grant you wisdom." She simply walked past a square where a boy was learning to read, walked past a rooftop where a woman was debating whether to withdraw her savings, walked past a forge where a young man was considering quitting his craft. And in each place she passed, there was no bright light, only stillness. It was the night Athens had no arguments, no accusations were filed, no debates in the square. No one said anything unnecessary, just that. Everyone quietly reconsidered the thing they were about to do tomorrow. Is it worth it? Does it need to be said? Where should I go? Could it wait just one more night? People don't remember exactly what Athena did that day. They only know that the next morning, a letter was torn in half before being sent. A lawsuit was postponed without reason. A poem was rewritten in a softer tone. And the olive tree in the square suddenly sprouted a new branch, planted by no one. Athena didn't need to stay, because she knew she wasn't the fixer. She was the one who cleared the way for people to fix things themselves. She didn't choose for you. She just quieted the noise, so you could hear your own voice again. If you've ever gone quiet in a conversation, and the other person realized what they needed to say, ever paused for 2 seconds before sending a message, and then deleted it, then maybe Athena just passed by you. No shoes, no magic, just a very soft footstep that somehow turned your thoughts a different way. She has no lover, no close-knit group of friends, no love poems, farewell songs, or anyone who ever beat a drum swearing to die for her. Not because Athena has no feelings, but because she hides them in places no one dares to look. When people talk about Hera, they remember bitter love, mention Aphrodite and its desire, beauty, and reckless affairs. And Athena, they say, wisdom, short, clean, as if she were a tool, not a person. They remember her when they need cunning, when they need strategy, when someone needs to rewrite the plan in a burning meeting. Then they forget, because she causes no drama, no heartbreak, no crying in the temple courtyard that forces someone to comfort her. But if you pay attention, you'll see Athena in the moments no one records, when a soldier steps back instead of fighting out of pride, when a mother chooses forgiveness over cursing, when someone rewrites the end of a letter in a way that hurts less. Athena doesn't show up with thunder. She shows up with a small shift in thought, a gentle movement of compassion. A moment where you hold back, not out of fear, but because you've understood something new. No one fully understands Athena, because you don't understand her by reading more books. You understand her by falling quiet for a moment, in the middle of everyone else speaking. If you've ever found yourself the last to leave the room, after cleaning up files, sending the draft, locking the door, if you've ever thought, no one needs to know, as long as the job gets done. If you've ever stayed silent when misunderstood, because you knew no one was clear-headed enough to understand you at that moment, then you don't need to understand Athena. You're already living alongside her,